When I founded Atomico in 2006, I was determined to prove that great companies could come from anywhere, and that Europe in particular had most of the ingredients for a thriving technology ecosystem: top talent, some of the best universities, and an advanced telecommunications infrastructure. We had also proven that we could build global companies in other sectors, such as automotive, retail, fashion. A lot has changed since then, and today we have over 200 unicorns here in Europe. It is my pleasure to speak today with someone who is as passionate as I am about the strength and the potential of the European tech ecosystem. Mr. President, thank you for speaking with me today.
Thank you for being here.
As you know, today we're launching our annual report. And tell me, why are you so interested in speaking about the state of European tech?
Look, because I think this is one of the best ways to completely transform and reshape our world. I think our people, and especially young people, are strong believers in tech, and we are reshaping everything in our day-to-day life thanks to tech. And I think as a president or as government, it's very important first to follow and try to understand these trends in order to accelerate and to be sure that we are part of the leaders. This is the very first point. Otherwise, you are just consumer of the tech of somebody else.
Yes.
Second, I think this is the best way to try to innovate in your environment, to maximize value created here, to build and to invent new jobs. And third, I think if you don't take care about tech, you have to live with the external negative consequences, and you have some. And this is why I do believe it's important as well to follow tech and to try to be part of it in order to make tech as a solution for a better world, and not just a solution for some people to earn more money, which is fine for me, and it is part of the game, but to be sure that this is the best possible contribution for, climate change, and in order to address our CO2 emission, for biodiversity, in order to deal with inequalities, in order precisely to have a more inclusive society, and so on.
Yeah, no, that's right. This year, 2020, must have been the most turbulent year than I can remember. And this is also, as you're pointing out, a time when we need solutions and the people who can innovate to do things in a different way. And how do you think that European tech entrepreneurs can contribute?
Look, first, they did contribute. They did contribute in such a year because they, thanks to, the big transformation in our companies and in our societies. When you look marketplaces, through teleworkings, and so on, we used a lot of tech innovations in our day-to-day life. We used a lot of US innovations and US solutions, but more and more European solutions as well.
Yes.
And for me now, what we have to do is in each sector, in each innovation, how to build the European solution and European sovereignty. Yeah. And for me, when I look at today's situation and the COVID-19 context, we have a lot of reorganization of our social life.
Yes.
A lot of our tech companies can be part of them in order to consume, in order to work, in a more, I would say, flexible way.
Yeah.
But our people are keen on having more values, more sense, and they want social innovations, but including people living here. Yeah. Our local farmers, people living here and working and interacting with you through this innovation. Second, on the health, the healthcare sector. Thanks to innovation and the tech companies, we are at the very beginning of a new revolution for me, with a much more personalized and predictive medicine. Yeah. This is why I launched on Friday with a lot of French startups, but as well academic labs and universities, Paris Santé Campus, which will be in the very middle of the city, in Val-de-Grâce, so a super place in the middle of Paris, in order to have digital health innovations. And we will invest several billions We will involve Dassault Systèmes, Sanofi, i.e. a software company, a large cap, and famous French large caps in the classical healthcare system, but a lot of startups, artificial intelligence players and so on. And this is the best way for me, and this is the best example, to have European entrepreneurs trying to completely change and disrupt the healthcare system. They will help to have predictive medicine, new treatments, to reorganize totally hospitals and medicine for people, and change the system for the best.
So healthcare is certainly one of the industries and the sectors we believe will completely be transformed by technology, and it's going to help us to have healthier lives.
Because you have medical devices, you have software, hardware, artificial intelligence, and classical healthcare innovations. And on top of that, my strong belief is that we will have to add human sciences, philosophy, ethics, and so on. If you have all these competences plus math and so on around the table, you can indeed completely have breakthrough and put on the table new strong innovations, but you have to think at the very beginning how to make this innovation acceptable for people, for their own health system, how to make them acceptable for the system, to have predictive and personalized medicine without having a sort of social bias. I mean, nobody wants a system where we will improve the way to treat you, to better understand perhaps the potential disease you have, but we don't want to have you a more expensive insurance system because we know that about yourself. So this is one of the examples of the very tricky approach. So healthcare for me is very, very key.
And so we both share the common view that startups are key for economic growth in the future. And here in France, you have some of the best educational institutions. And so how do we encourage more people to become entrepreneurs? And given some of the big societal movements that we've seen this year, how can we encourage access for talented young people who are coming from underprivileged groups in society to also become entrepreneurs?
Look, this is a very, you're perfectly right, one of the critical issues, because you waste a lot of value and opportunities for people when they don't access to this part of our economy, i.e. entrepreneurship, and you kill a lot of value for yourself as a society. So what we try to do is, first, we invested a lot in poor neighborhood for education by having 12 people per class between the age of 4 to 7, and by increasing basically compulsory education from 3 to 16, plus between 16 and 18, now it's compulsory to have either education or training or apprenticeship system, because this is how to correct the social inequalities you have. So better education, more skills at school and so on. Something we have still to change, and for me it will be through new role models, is how to be sure that people are not blocked by themselves and the fact that they consider that they shouldn't, it's impossible, they will be part of it. And we have a lot of talents coming from immigration, poor neighborhoods and so on. It's super obvious for people they can access, for instance, to soccer. But it's less obvious they can access to entrepreneurship. And so on. And what we did is, with entrepreneurs and business angels, we launched new initiative, École 42, School 42, launched by Xavier Niel, for people to learn to code and so on. A large majority of these young people come from poor neighborhood without a lot of academic diploma, Station F, and a lot of this kind of ecosystem. Second, this is the official speech. If you take a place where you have 2 international, basically, airports, one of the greatest stadium, which will be part of our Olympic Games 2024, which is the youngest part of the country, north of Paris. You should say this is a French California. This is Seine-Saint-Denis. and seen as one of the poorest neighborhoods. Because you have a lot of people basically coming from migration, and we made this mistake a few years ago to concentrate difficulties there. If you change the mindset, and de facto, now, this is the place where we have one of the most level and the highest level of startup creations. So I think education and investment in education, official speech and how to change and convert the mindset. And third, new role models. And we have a lot of entrepreneurs coming from poor neighborhoods and so on. And entrepreneurship is one of the best way, basically, to progress in societies. It's much more fair than large caps and so on, with a lot of codes and a meritocratic system, which is sometimes much more conformist. So this is, for me, the best way now to increase and maximize these opportunities for these young people. But this is why I have, first, to keep on having a lot of people creating startups in this country. Second, to have now scale-up strategy. Third, in order to do so, is to keep our talents and to attract new talents. When you have people coming from India, UK, Sweden, US, China, coming in Paris or other cities to join the startup ecosystems, it completely changed the mindset, and it's much more easy to have people coming from migration and poor neighborhood to be involved in your startup community. And so having talents is critical to have a scale-up of our startup ecosystem. So we created this French Tech Visa in order to facilitate and streamline all the administrative process and this bureaucracy in order to get access to everything. Second, we are still very attractive because we completely changed the way to look at France. You have free education, free healthcare system, and with a lot of other talents. So it's super attractive for talent. It's much, I have to say, much better than going to California, because education for your people will never cost thousands of dollars a year. Nobody will ask for your paper or to pay first when you have a disease and you have to go to hospital. So this is the way to have attractiveness for Paris in this country. And third, we do believe in climate change, and we are completely changing the country. So talents and financing. And we pushed very much during the past 2 years to have much more financing of the startup ecosystem. And one of the critical points on that is, first, we changed the tax situation. We created a flat tax of 30%. We killed the wealth tax for entrepreneurs. And we had a very strong increase of investment of our own entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. Second, we build on the business angels, entrepreneurs, and seed funds and private equity ecosystem. And we accelerate this point by making a financing innovation with new funds. And we gathered 6 billion coming from asset managers and large investors in order to redirect them on the startup ecosystem. And the result is here. We are #1 today in large tickets and in funding of the startup ecosystem for this year.
Yeah, so it's a record of 4 billion euros this year, which is, I think, twice it was used 3 years ago. And this is outpacing UK and Germany. So certainly it's happening. And I agree with you on the topic of role models. I think that role models are so important for entrepreneurs or people, talented people, to see someone like me, someone from my background can make this happen. And this was really much when we started Atomico was the vision that we had. So I'm so glad that you're aligned on that vision. It's so important. I want to touch on very, very quickly on something I know that you're very vocal about the topic of digital sovereignty. And you have been repeatedly said that we in Europe, we need to build our own solutions. We're not dependent on American or Chinese tech companies. And with that, what do you want to achieve, and how do you think you can achieve that?
Look, by exactly such a strategy, we need European financing, European solutions, European talents, European regulation. And till now, when you look at the map, you had what we call here in Europe the GAFA in the US, BATX in China, GDPR in Europe.
Yeah.
So we have regulation, fair points. This is a global reference.
Yes.
But we don't have the equivalent of these very, very large caps.
No, not yet.
And not yet. And we have some very smart and good ideas and successes with a few tech companies which became actual success, coming from all over the place and changed totally basically our landscape. What we need is, I do believe, to accelerate the European financing. Having an actual European finance market. It's not yet the case. We have to accelerate the integration because the more you have your own financing, the more you have large tickets, the more you have your own M&As and your own investors with a potential exit to a European market, it's super. Euronext made a very great job, but this is still the very beginning. We have to accelerate financial European integration because it's key for this sector, which needs a lot of capital.
Yeah.
Second, we need an actual European digital market. Yeah. Today, a lot of entrepreneurs have to deal with 27 regulations. Yes. And it's very hard because we speak about digital regulation, but sector by sector regulation, because it depends on sometimes your retail regulation. And domestic market for a US player is just US day one, and for a Chinese player is China day one. So this is why for me, the different directives arriving in the coming weeks, mid-December, for digital services and digital market are very critical. Yes. And they are part of a sovereign strategy because it's how to have common rules to streamline and to lift barriers between the different countries. And third, we need our own regulation. And I think it's a win-win situation for our consumers and citizens. Why? Because it is how to guarantee to citizens and consumers, we can explain to you and report about privacy rules and so on. This is a European standard for democratic values. Otherwise, it's impossible. If I depend on the US cloud, I depend on US law and US regulation. I cannot guarantee you about the use of your data. If you want me to guarantee you about the use of your data, I need a European regulation. I have to guarantee I have, on the very critical points, European devices. Yes. And I have to guarantee I have a European cloud. Yeah. Because otherwise, your data will be somewhere in the cloud under another regulation. The only way to do so is actually to have this final European regulation. Yes. And the European, I would say, equipment accompanying this regulation. Yeah. So this is why, for me, financing, integration of our market and an actual single market, regulation for privacy and technological innovation, and having European data, European cloud, and European technologies to be sure we don't depend on the others. And this is how to maximize value creation in Europe as well. And this is where we will reconcile value creation for European economies and European workers, and respect of our values for citizens.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And on the financing, there's a huge opportunity here also with the large pension funds that we have in Europe that to invest in tech, so that when we have these successful scale-ups, that the value creation is staying in Europe and doesn't go to foreign investors.
You're right. In fact, you have pension funds in some places. We have the insurance companies, and I think at a point of time we will have to revise and profoundly revisit insurance, private equity, and banking regulations in order to favor investment in tech and more than that, equity creating values. Yes. Because one of the consequences of the financial crisis 10 years ago was the fact that we over-regulated these players.
Yes.
Where, I mean, they didn't create the problem 10 years ago. It was super traders in the US and on the market financing which created the problem. And the result is that we over-regulated these big players. Yeah. And a lot of savings in Europe, and especially continental Europe, are indeed in pension funds in insurance company, in banking sector.
Yes.
We have to help our regulation to basically shift part of this savings to equity financing.
Yes.
It will be very good for tech companies.
I agree. And lastly, you already touched on the climate.
Yeah.
And just a few days ago, you encouraged 75 tech executives, including me, to sign the call for Tech for Good and outlining a transition to an ecological future. And we're now in COVID, but the big problem long term is really the climate crisis.
Yes.
And how can we activate tech companies to really fight this crisis?
No, thank you very much. First of all, one word perhaps on this call, and thank you for having signed it. This call was for me very important, and is an intermediary result after 3 years of commitment, having a lot of CEOs. It's how to create a club of tech companies sharing not just innovation and tech, but as well values. Yes. And saying we have sometimes externalities in the market, and this is our common problem and our common concern. Yeah. So this call will be followed. Just to have a series of rendezvous. 4th of March, we will create a scale-up meeting in Paris, 4th of March, in order precisely to have more impact and accelerate on this scale-up strategy. And in June, we will have a new Tech for Good meeting in 2021. But for me, the perspective is how tech companies can invest more themselves in green solutions, and how they can invent themselves new solutions. I mean, thanks to tech innovations, we can reduce logistics, we can reduce carbon emissions, we can produce much more rapidly and much more, I mean, in the very end market, which is much better for the carbon footprint. Thanks to tech innovations, you can reduce mobility or optimize mobility in order to reduce CO2 emission. Thanks to tech innovations, you can reduce the carbon emission for households when they want to live on a daily basis. So for me, tech innovations should be driven by, this common goal, which is climate change. And if you put it as an objective of the system at the very beginning, you completely change the DNA of the system itself. And my conviction is that sometimes it's very hard for all companies and all systems and all governments to make a shift, because you have to deal with past interests, and you have to help your people to make this things changing. You have to invest a lot to compensate and so on. When you speak about new companies, day one, you have to tailor the project in order to take into consideration the final objectives. We want a world with less CO2 emission, with more biodiversity, with more inclusiveness for everybody. How to take that as number one objectives of the system, as important as making profit for the shareholders. And if you put these values, plus I would say democratic values, because if you say all these things are the number one objectives of your system, you shape the model in such a way that everybody is driven by this perspective. And I had to say climate change, inclusiveness, and democratic values are three critical issues for tech companies, because the tech sector was created by a pure private initiatives and innovations, which is unique in our history, in our world. But sometimes it was purely driven by profit making. But young generations, and especially young entrepreneurs, they need to better understand and to make history, in effect, to make history. And they want to change this world, to make it a better place. And if we say making it a better place is being sure that everybody has a fair place in this world, in economy and society, whatever the color could be, whatever the gender could be, whatever your country could be. If you say making it a better place is a world with less CO2 emission and a more biodiversity answer. And if you say making it a better place is a world with freedom of speech, without hatred speech, without racism and so on. This is something you can do thanks to social networks, thanks to tech innovation. It's definitely feasible. But these issues were seen till now as sort of external issues and not a business issue. And sometimes our businesses, I would say, increase the difficulties in these different fields.
Yes.
And create more problem, having negative externalities to be dealt with by the government. No, I mean, and you're players, you're part of it, and we can make history together. And with tech leaders, we can make history on this field.
Mr. President, I so much share those values and that vision, and it is true, it's happening right in front of our eyes. The founders that we see on a daily basis have those same values and the same mission as you have, Mr. President. So I believe we'll get there, but we also need to all work together to make it happen. It's a lot of work in front of us, and I know that you have short of time, so I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and I hope to continue the conversation maybe in June at the Tech for Good. Thank you, Mr. President.
Nicholas, I was very happy. Thank you very much to you and your team for taking the time to come to Paris and speak about this so important issue.
Very important, yes.
And I think we have, if you can touch new future entrepreneurs, I always accept, because I always imagine that a young girl or a young boy can look at your video and be sure that he can be part of it and he can make history thanks to this kind of initiatives.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Thank you for being so involved. Thank you.
Thank you.